Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to stop lying ourselves and the rest of the world. It is time for us to admit the unadmittable, if that's a word. I don't think it is. It is time for us to finally look at the other side of things for once, because personally, I am sick and tired of acting like the American tuner cars of the early 2000s were not something cool. My name is Mark Roden, and it is time to finally ask ourselves the question, what makes the Dodge Neon so great? Over here on the old Mark Dane Roden channel, we have done a plethora of what makes it great at this point. I think this is episode number 26 on them, if I'm not mistaken. I might start adding the little number in the thumbnail, by the way. Let me know if you guys think that's a good idea. But all the ones that I've made that have done well are oddly the ones you wouldn't expect to do well. Things like the Infiniti M45, Pontiac Fiero, and Honda Odyssey are all cars that I've just done some deep dives, dived deep into the realms of their history books, and somehow you guys just wanted to watch it, which is why I think it's a good idea to finally speak on the Dodge Neon. This car has never really been the golden standard of like an enthusiast car. It hasn't even been the golden standard for the market it was trying to infiltrate, the economy car, which is why I think this video will do so well, because over here in Mark Roden territory, we don't like the basic boy whips. We want to talk about the things that nobody likes, baby. So let's start off into this age-old adventure and hop into our time machine all the way back to 1991.
When we say Dodge Neon is around 13,000 nicely loaded, just what does nicely loaded mean? Well, how about things like an automatic, air, power steering, power locks, power remote mirrors, rear window defroster, standard driver and front passenger airbags, and much more. Dodge Neon. For around 13,000, you can do quite nicely. Say hello to Dodge Neon at your friendly Dodge dealer today.
Now you may be saying to yourself, hold on, Mark, the oh-so-handsome one. How come we're going back to 1991 when the first generation of the Dodge Neon didn't come out until 1994? And the answer is simple, Frederick, the oh-so-bad at Call of Duty one, because in 1991, Chrysler decided to release a concept car of the Dodge Neon, which had sliding suicide doors that I just thought looked absolutely hilarious and really wanted you guys to see this. So we jumped back 3 more years to the concept car because you guys have to see these doors. I mean, they're absolutely wacky. But yes, you are right. The first generation Dodge Neon didn't come out until 1994, and when it did come out, the world really didn't know what to think. On one hand, it did what it set out to do. It was a compact car for the masses that was pretty affordable at an MSRP of only $9.5K or $19.8K in today's money. But on the other hand, it was not what the world was expecting, like Drake dropping a ding-a-ling pic on Twitter, or Toby Keith, God rest his soul. Oh my God, did you hear about that? I was heartbroken. I ain't as good as I once was. Anyways, yes, the Dodge Neon, looking back at it now, is very easy to make fun of the looks, but back then it really didn't look too bad, and for the price it was almost unbeatable. And for people who wanted to have fun in their $19,000 economy car, there was also a sport option available for you too, which actually was sportier than the base model, or Highline option 2, which is not always the case when car companies call a car a sport model. There's literally the Subaru Impreza, like the 2013 Subaru Imprezas, they had a sport model where the only difference was just bigger wheels and some fake carbon fiber in it. That was it. That's insanity. There's nothing sporty about that. It was just called the Sport, but there's nothing sporty about it.
So that was a fucking lie.
But the base in the Highline trim levels came with a 1.8 liter inline 4, making 132 horsepower. However, the Sport model came with the same motor, but was offering 150 horsepower, which is actually a pretty decent increase if you ask me. 18 horsepower compared to 132, that's a big jump, especially when you take into consideration that the car only weighed 2,400 pounds, and it had the typical stuff that sport models offer too, like a little spoiler on the back, some sportier looking wheels, and the bubble hood that a bunch of 90s cars had for some reason. So honestly, huge A plus to Chrysler for making the Neon Sport an actual increase over the base or Highline packages.
Oh yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
Unfortunately, however, there isn't much else to report back to HQ on for the first generation. In 1996, they gave all models the painted front and rear bumpers, which I mean is about as interesting as high school math classes, nobody cares about that. And they also gave the world a competition package, which actually did have some go fast bits, primarily to appeal to the autocross crowd. But the real key lime in this pie is the second generation, which rocketed onto the scene in 1999 for the 2000 model year, and overall, they definitely changed a lot. At first glance, you'll notice there's no longer coupe models for the second generation, which is kind of a take it or leave it thing for me. If on one hand, I like coupes, I think the body lines usually flow better on them, but on the other, the Dodge Neon never really looked too different depending on if you got the coupe or not. They all just looked the same. But the other big difference was the car was slightly larger in almost every way. Like me, when I see that pic of Sydney Sweeney on Hot Ones, you know what I'm talking about. That pic was great. It was heavier, longer, wider, and taller than the previous first generation, while also now only being offered with the 132 horsepower motor instead of the 150 horsepower one in the previous generation, which is a big shame. So you may be asking, why in God's name did Mark just say that the second generation is the key lime to this key lime pie right now, if it just kind of seems like a simple old normal old boring cream pie? And that's because in 2003 they dropped what they called the ACR line and replaced it with the iconic SRT4 Dodge Neon. Until this point, the Dodge Neon went through so many trials and tribulations, but just like every great car before it, all it needed was some time to figure itself out. If you're a muscle car guy watching this video or a drifter watching this video, then you may be scratching your head as to what could possibly be the appeal behind a little inline-4 front-wheel drive commuter car that some guy who is literally in his parents' basement right now just had to make a video telling the world how great it is. But if you're into autocross, then you already know, because this car was so light with such a small wheelbase, and Dodge finally figured that out when they released the SRT4 Neon. This car nowadays, sure, has been built to be drag cars, street racers, stance cars, and just about everything else, but back then, the people that were buying and modifying Neons were doing so to take them to an autocross track and finally beat those pesky Miatas, and Dodge figured that out. The SRT4 Neon was given a whole new everything, pretty much. It obviously had a much more aggressive body kit with a hood scoop and a large wing on the back, along with the obvious new front bumper, side skirts, wheels, and rear bumper too, but it was also finally given a new engine, and this time it was actually worth a damn. It was a brand new 2.4 liter turbocharged inline-4, and it was slapped into this car and, surprisingly, the PT Cruiser as well, and it managed to pump out 211 horsepower at launch, but would end its life making 230 horsepower. That's a huge jump for a car that was just making 132 horsepower just like 8 years earlier, and since it was also paired with tons of new tech bringing the horsepower number up so much, it obviously didn't stop there with its new modifications. No sirree Bob.
No sirree Bob.
It was also given completely new sport-tuned suspension and ABS brakes on all four corners in order to handle that added power, and a new interior to not only make you feel like you're driving a sports car, but to also grip you in the seat better when ripping around the cones in a Burger King parking lot. To say the SRT4 Neon was an increase would be a massive understatement. This might as well have been a completely new car from the earlier models of Dodge Neon, and the community saw that. Sure, during the huge JDM craze that we just went through on TikTok, the Neon didn't get much love, but that's just because it wasn't Japanese. But was it though? I mean, it had everything that people love in Japanese cars in it. A small, high revving motor that had tons of potential to get even quicker than it already was, and a lightweight body that's both reliable and cheap to buy. It's no wonder this car took off so well, and even the base models before this icon came out hold their own in certain forms of motorsports and will continue to stand the test of time for car guys everywhere. The base models were by no means anywhere as impactful as the SRT4, don't get me wrong, but to people who love autocross racing, they will always remember the little Dodge Neon Sport as being a car that nobody expected but everybody respected, and to me, that's just amazing. Now, this wasn't the last generation of the Dodge Neon, despite what everyone believes though. They did actually bring it back in 2016, but honestly, the story is just kind of sad. The car was only ever offered for sale in Mexican markets and was pretty much just a rebadged Fiat for the Mexicans. They even had plans to bring the car to both the Middle Eastern markets and yes, even the United States markets, but unfortunately the car didn't sell well, and in 2021 it was discontinued after the two main rivals of the car, the Chevy Cruze and the Ford Focus, were also both no longer for sale in the United States, just further proving that in America we're slowly shifting away from cars and mainly selling only trucks and SUVs now, meaning we may never see a random commuter car rise to greatness like the Dodge Neon or the Honda Civic ever again.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
See, to me, the Dodge Neon isn't the best car out there. To most people, I would say the Dodge Neon isn't the best car out there. Hell, I didn't even pick the Dodge Neon as my first car in Need for Speed Underground, but it did something that the world just did not see coming. It created an actually cool tuner car that Japanese tuners and American muscle guys can both get behind, and it did all that while going through tons of problems the entire runtime, from the fans getting upset when they initially released the RT line stating that a front-wheel drive commuter car should not be given the RT badge, to the complete death of Plymouth in 2001. This little car that seems like everybody's aunt somehow owned once in their lives went through hell to get to a point where even now, 30 years after it launched, people are still talking about them over and over again. And that is what makes the Dodge Neon so great. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's video of what makes the Dodge Neon so great. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. I know that I was kind of a little bit all over the place today's deep dive. I was probably, messing up my words here and there, jumbling up my words a little bit. But that's because today, this script, I wasn't like feeling the script, Every time I was like reading it, there's a lot of improv is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of, within this script, I wrote the script obviously, but I was reading it back and I just couldn't get everything perfectly right. It was kind of hard. I don't know. That doesn't usually happen with these deep dives. Usually I get it flowing, the juices start flowing, I start making the best deep dive out there. I'm like, best thing I can possibly do. Today, it was kind of hard. I don't know what it was. Dodge Neon effect? Is that it? Is Dodge Neon messing with my brain? Maybe it's a turbo. Maybe it's because it's making 230 horsepower in a front wheel drive car from the early 2000s and I was mind blown by it. Maybe. No, I don't know what was going on though. So if I sound a little all over the place today, that's why. But as you guys know, I don't really take it super professionally on this channel anyway, so I'm not going to be like, the Dodge Neon was built in 2002 and it had this much horsepower. It was good. Good car. Liked it. I liked it a lot. Next thing about the Dodge Neon is it also had cool bumpers. No, I don't do that. So if I mess up, I'm not going to go back there and be like, oh, they're not going to like that. Nah, man. You got to ride with me. We're together. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Let me know what other deep dives you want to see in the channel from Mo. And Das Vidania. Have a nice night.